Thanks for joining us, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here in a minute or so. I'm just waiting for a few more people to log on here. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today to learn about buying a franchise in the current economy. We're going to ask everyone to mute themselves, please, if you haven't already. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Kirsten Leffler. I'm the Assistant Director with the Family Business Center. We've recently had several members inquire about franchising. What goes into it? Does having a system and support network in place, is it worth the additional dollars? Can you really work limited hours, etc.? So we've gathered a couple of people today who can help to answer those questions and any others that you may have. So we have Tracy Rickman and Jeff Williams. Tracy Rickman, she's the owner of FranNet and the president of Northern Ohio. She has owned FranNet for 12 plus years now, Tracy?
Yep, 13 years.
Yeah, 15. Okay. But her background is in corporate America. She transitioned into ownership to find balance between being a mom and having a career, having a family. Jeff Williams, he's also joining us. He's a center member. He graduated from the University of Toledo, and during his senior year founded a portfolio management company, which actively managed high net worth individuals' investment accounts. He was eventually bought out by his partner, went into business consulting, before getting back into ownership and buying into Bassett Nut Company. He also owns a franchise called Cookie Cutters, which specializes in fun haircuts for kids. Jeff is also an active volunteer within our community. So if you have any questions for Tracy or Jeff during the presentation, please feel free to drop your questions into the chat box. We'll be monitoring those throughout the webinar. There will be also time at the end of the presentation for Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Tracy and Jeff. Tracy, I think you're going to get started.
Great. Good morning, everyone. As you mentioned, my name is Tracy Rickman. I am the owner of FranNet of Northern Ohio, and FranNet is actually a franchise. So that is one of the businesses that I own. FranNet is a 35-year-old international franchise consulting firm. So we help people who want to start a business, but don't know what that business is. A lot of times my clients say we're a little bit like eHarmony for business. So we have a system of matching people with a business. It starts with an assessment tool that kind of feels like you're taking a personality profile, but what we're doing is measuring values and motives and the things that have made you successful in the past. And we use that as a tool to match you where you're most like top performers in a franchise. And then we sit down and we build a business model around the things that you want to do or that you want the business to do for you. And it can be things that are really important, like, how much money do you want to make? How much time do you want to invest? And things that we don't think about, like, are you more comfortable in a shirt and tie or a golf shirt with your logo on it? Do you want to be home for dinner every night? Do you want to coach the kids in a sport or an activity? And therefore, certain days or times need to be open. So all these things that are really important in lifestyle. So I kind of feel like a lot of the passion for a business comes from what the business does for you. If you would have asked me 15 years ago if I'd own a business, I would say yes. Always wanted to, ever since I was a little girl playing in my grandfather's home office. If you told me that was a franchise, honestly, I would have laughed and thought you had the right girl, or that I got to buy Dairy Queen because I love ice cream. So I would have thought the best business for me must be, an ice cream location. But if you look at the role of an owner of somebody who owns a Dairy Queen, they're investing at least $500,000 and then hiring high school students to run their investment. So not necessarily, kind of the right business model for me. So I started actually as a FranNet client. My degree, I'm a chemist by degree, so I have 20 years of technical and consultative sales. I actually started right here in Toledo at Betco Corporation as a college job, really as a bench chemist, just making things. And it kind of really grew to running the general chemistry department, doing general products with them, and then ultimately went off into technical sales. Most recently in my career, I worked for a company called Church & Dwight. If you're not familiar with Church & Dwight, you'd be familiar with their main product, which is Arm & Hammer. And I worked in their industrial division, and I traveled around really calling on steel mills and any plant that made parts prior to paint for the automotive industry, and I solved problems. I loved what I did. I really loved the going in and being the one that went in and tried to figure out what was causing the problems, chemistry-wise, fixing it, getting lines back up and getting running. I hated the travel. So I started with 7 states, I ended up with 15, and I had 2 small boys at home, and I was really missing the opportunity to occasionally be room mom or go on the field trip. I'm not a stay-at-home mom. I always wanted my career, but I needed that balance. So when someone reached out to me from FranNet, I almost hung up on him because I really thought franchising was only fast food and 1-hour Martinizing. But there's actually 3,000 franchises in 90 different industries. So it's a lot bigger than most people are familiar with. And really what it comes down to is finding that right match. So going back to a little bit more about FranNet, we're very picky about the franchises that we work with. We look for franchises with a low turnover and the ability of the owner to replace a 6-figure income. So a lot of times my clients are coming out of corporate America, they've been downsized, and they're either, kind of tired of that kind of corporate ladder and not getting to where they want to get. They're tired of being downsized a lot, or they're looking to be in control of their future. So we really don't have any kind of business that I would consider a hobby. So, maybe a $40,000 income. We're looking at things that are in the nice high sixes almost revenue-wise. Income-wise for the franchise owner. And as I started looking at franchising, right, as I was looking to leave corporate America, what was really interesting is that my consultant showed me some really unusual businesses, something that was a vinyl leather fabric repair, an IT company, and an expense reduction company. And I thought he was absolutely crazy because with my chemistry background and my technical sales, nothing seemed like a fit. But as I started to really investigate what was going on with the 3 different businesses, what was very similar was the role of the owner and that really executive model allowing me to go off and do what I love to do, which was problem solving. And that's ultimately where I decided that I wanted to be on the other side. I wanted to be the FranNet consultant, really helping people to see the fit and the possibilities that could be there with business ownership. So there's a couple different ways that you can look at franchise ownership. A lot of people look at it as kind of the owner operator. They're the one going out every day running the business like a full-time job. But there are all the other opportunities, and Jeff will talk a little bit more about that are called semi-absentee, which means you could have a job and a business, or you can own a business and have another business. So it was kind of highlighted before, my husband and I own 3 different franchises, and we run them at different levels of our time into the business. So something that's semi-absentee is something that you spend, somewhere between, 8 to maybe 15 hours a week, depending on the business, managing a manager who's taking care of those day-to-day operations. The great thing about franchising and why it works is because it really is the original kind of business in the box. It's about as turnkey as it can get. All the systems are in place and you go in and you do basically what they tell you to do. So if you think about a McDonald's, right, they don't really care if you know how to make a better burger. And I'm sure that everyone on here, can make a better hamburger. It's really about their system and the consistency. So whether you knew what a hamburger was or not, you're going to go in and know exactly how to make it because of the systems that they have in place. So when you think about that with a franchise, that's really how it applies through just about any industry. And they cover, as I mentioned earlier, about 90 different industries. So when you think about how that works, it comes down then to really aligning with that role of the owner and what you want that business to either do for you or add to you. So a lot of times folks look at franchising as a way to diversify portfolios, giving folks, some opportunity to have multiple income streams coming in, which is something that's been very big recently with the younger, the millennials and the generation coming up behind them, kind of with this idea of a gig economy. So the nice thing about that franchising is it can fit into different things. It's also a great way to go out and build a business. So it can be your distribution channel if you're looking to franchise a current business as well. We see a lot of times folks looking, as we mentioned, for that business to run themselves, looking at something that can be semi-absentee, offering that other income stream, or looking at, hey, I have this great business right now. It runs really well, but it's not giving me the income I want for long term, or to bring in, children or other streams. So we can look at that as a way to diversify maybe your portfolio or that income stream or that offering to the customer. So a lot of franchises now are looking at, if you have one business in one territory, what can you stack on top? So offering other products or other services to your already existing consumer base or customer base. A lot of times when we think about franchising too, we really focus only on business to consumer because that's what we think of, but there are so many businesses out there that are business to business as well. Lots of different opportunities to look at business from different aspects. And if we go back to what most of us think of as a franchise with fast food, a lot of times we think, well, we're looking at a 7-day-a-week, maybe a 24/7 type operation. Whether you're open those hours or not, you've got to prepare for that. But there's so many businesses that also look into what's really important to you time-wise. And as far as hours, not only that you're putting into the business, but that you would be required to be at the business or have someone there. So some of the things that I love about the franchising industry, and I think ultimately why I went down the path, was this idea of having the system that gave you the freedom and flexibility with as much control over those next steps as you wanted. Franchising works really well because it's that system that we all go in and we implement and we put into place. And then franchising works again because then we really become this franchise family. As I mentioned, FranNet's a 35-year-old company. We're actually international now, but it's this opportunity to have one person put together different things or build a brand and then someone else to build on it next door to us without ever having that competition, that ability to everybody work together for one area or as a family business. In the business, we work across those streams as well. Fit is one of those things that's really important to think of when you think about a business and really focusing on the role of the owner. And one of the examples I use a lot of times is folks who come out of corporate America. A lot of times I work with men and they think about, well, I love to golf. So a great business might be helping other people to golf or having a golf store. And if you're doing that, you're not spending the time golfing, you're spending the time helping other people to do that. So one of the things that we look at when we talk about fit is that lifestyle piece and those things that are really important to people. And looking out not only, in the next year, but 5, 10, 15, 20 years out into the future, and how all of those things roll out into a business as far as growth as well. So when we sit down and put together a business plan, so going kind of back to process, taking an assessment, coming up with a list of businesses, and then putting together this kind of business plan around what this perfect scenario looks like. We'll talk about things like employees. Are they full-time, part-time, skilled, unskilled? Maybe you don't have a skilled employee, but you have an employee that has a different or higher skill level or degree than you do. You're still managing them. We'll look at things like sales. How do you feel about business to business, business to consumer? Are you the hunter that loves to go out and sell and knock on doors? Or are you somebody that's really looking for a marketing driven approach? Or if we're looking at something that's more referral based, how are those different businesses falling into line and how are you out there communicating with them? There are people that really don't want to have any kind of sales at all. They just want to build it and people will come. So something that's very passively oriented. Think about things that are retail focused, right? If you build it, people see it, they will come to you. But then there are businesses that may be in the light industrial area that are really more driven by a BNI or something that's more relationship based. We'll also look at things like maturity. A lot of times people don't think about maturity when it comes to a business, but folks who are very entrepreneurial maybe want an outline. Explain to me what's going on with the business. Let me step into that. Versus folks who maybe are more looking for a mature or an actual enterprise. They're looking at the business from a different aspect. Tell me every step what to do throughout the day. A little analogy I used for that are the folks who are going to build maybe the equipment or a house furniture from IKEA, right? Some of us will look at the picture on the box and try to put it together, and other ones of us will read the entire manual before we go to put the business together. So when you think about that in the light of a franchise, there's that maturity of the brand as well, as far as where you would be more comfortable. You have people who are not only the ground floor, but maybe the basement getting in and very entrepreneurial. And then you have folks that are waiting until a couple of stories are built into that business before they're interested in that. So looking at that kind of maturity and how that aligns with not only you personally, but what you're looking to grow in time. Other things we'll take a look at is image, things again that people don't think about. One of my favorite questions to ask a client when it comes to putting together an image is, how do you feel about a porta potty business? Everybody sees them, everybody knows that they're necessary, and it is a good business. But as we think about it, not many people want to go around telling people they started a new business, and by the way, it's porta potties. A lot of times we may say something like a mobile green disposal unit. So thinking about kind of this image of the business and how that reflects not only on you and what you're going to start, but maybe what it reflects on what you currently have as far as other businesses. So really kind of that fit of those different pieces and how they align are so very important with that. Other things to take into consideration and really look at when it comes to kind of this business and the business development side, as well as that maturity and how it all fits with you, is how does all that fall into things like work-life balance and family, and a lot of times things like children and what do we have growing up that are going to be important. When I went back to start my franchise business, I was working in corporate America. I was traveling 3 to 4 nights a week. So as I mentioned, I was missing those kind of times with my kids. But when I looked at starting a business, what I really wanted was that flexibility during the day to do the things that you really can't do in your corporate America. And I'm supposed to be working, 8 to 5 every day. So those things that are important lifestyle-wise. I meet folks who are really good at getting things done and being very focused on, getting everything done in a 9 to 5. But I also work with those folks who want to have a finger on their business all the time. So it's important to them to be home maybe for dinner, and then to be able to log in and look at things like maybe KPIs in the evening, but have that time that's completely 100% theirs. We work with folks who maybe want to spend a lot of time, as get into Jeff's story a little bit when he talks about being able to boat on the weekends and having that time off from his business, but having that business still going. So it's putting those pieces together. And then the other thing I think to think about when you're thinking about franchising either a current business or adding maybe to a portfolio or to your offerings is really that diversity and bringing in those other services or other areas that you may be able to benefit from and really grow to. And as we were talking today, Kirsten even mentioned that there may be some folks on here who have an existing business and are really looking to franchise that as well. So before I kind of pass the baton, I thought maybe we would talk a little bit about that and then actually leave it open to questions for the end for specifics. But if you have an existing business that you're really looking to franchise, some of the things you'll want to start looking at and putting into place are the systems, the operations manuals, the procedurals, the things that somebody can copy or create when you're not there. So when the founder or the original business is not there. And these are all things that can be done ahead of time, and putting these things into place, as well as maybe licensing that idea. So if we have, a business, I'm just going to use my little tissue box. The way that we went from tissues in a rate box to something that, you know, pops up and the next one's there. If you think about that system and you put together, here's the instructions step by step to do that. And we have that opportunity to kind of make that something that somebody can follow those directions. And then we test it, right? We maybe license that idea to the next person. And then once we have that license put together and we know that the systems are there and we didn't miss any steps, then I think we have a business that's ready to be franchised. And then we look into all the legal things. So just I guess a little snippet about that for those of you that may be on here. And I'm happy to talk to anybody as well about specific ideas or what you have or what you're looking to franchise to make sure that those steps are there. And I think that's what you had on my list, Kristen. Anything else that I'm missing to touch on before we pass it over?
No, I don't think so. I think you covered the majority of what we were looking for. We did. I appreciate you talking a little bit about members who maybe want to franchise their businesses and touching on that. So, Jeff, if you want to kind of tell your story a little bit and why you decided to franchise, that would be great.
Thank you. And I am going to share my screen so you don't look at my face for the next 15 minutes. I put together a very generic slide deck. Hopefully you can follow along as I talk about my journey into franchising. One second. So before I get into franchising, about myself, and this actually kind of defines why I got into franchising. As Kirsten mentioned, I bought into Bassett Nut Company 7 or so years ago. Bassett Nut has been around since the late 1920s. Started in the garage, roasting nuts, selling them. Eventually grew to the point where we were, excuse me, should I clear my throat before I started? We eventually moved into bulk distribution, selling through like malls, retail outlets, if you can remember scooping nuts from containers back in the day and weighing them. As that declined, we pivoted into the promotional products, and that's how most people know us now. 30% of our business is locally, so hopefully you received one of our gifts. The rest is done nationally through a distribution network. But we really specialize in tins, nuts, popcorns, candies. You can see the wooden collectibles that we do engrave in-house. Then just chipboard, more inexpensive but fully decorated packages that kind of were more for marketing materials. As you can imagine and see, most of our business is fourth quarter, heavily for the holiday gifts. 90% actually is in the fourth quarter, and 80% is in about a 7-week time frame. So it's all hands on deck from November to right up to Christmas. With that, there's a lot of challenges from the seasonality. Staffing right now, I have 4 employees. We get up to 30. So it's managing 2 shifts. It's hard to find someone to manage those shifts. So you will find me here till 11 o'clock at night, almost 7 days a week during that time frame. It also has supply issues and deadlines. Unlike most places that can say, hey, our lead time is now extended, we still have to hit your deadlines because they're holiday gifts and need to be delivered at a certain point. So there's just a lot of challenges in that. We've tried to grow it with other product offerings outside of that, but it's really hard to get people to get on board with food gifts outside the holidays. So leading into the franchising, I was looking at businesses to acquire that could be kind of synergistic with Bassett Nut Company. I was looking really for anything that I could keep my employees year round, because that's the toughest part, is letting them go and hoping they come back the following year. So I never really found anything. It was difficult to find a business that, you know, I could actually turn off in the fourth quarter. So we left that, and we're just maintaining Bassett is what it is. But the reason I bring that up is I was on mailing lists for business opportunities, and email that describing semi-absentee. Wasn't aware of that. My franchising back franchise was the owner operator, meaning he drove the truck, did the work. That was just semi-absentee, as Tracy mentioned. It's 5-10 hours a week. You're really just managing behind the scenes. Have someone there on site doing the actual work, or producing the product or delivering the service. So from that point, it started to make more sense. And I always thought franchising wasn't a bad idea. As Tracy said, a business in a box, essentially doing startups without having the startup headaches. So you don't have to really do too much research on the market. You don't have to create the marketing system. You don't have to create the processes. In my case, I don't have to do any POS. It's also from it follows a proven model. So Tracy also mentioned there's businesses that franchise their own business because they know it works. So that's why when you're getting into a franchise, it has success records. All that is documented. So if there are franchises in their system failing, they have to disclose that to you. So when you're doing your due diligence, and if you look, you'll see what the success rate is. And then you're also getting, the best practices from the franchises. The one I bought into, for example, has over 100 locations. So they're going to take what works in different locations and make it and share with you. The other big thing is with franchising is the support system. The franchisor, they are there obviously to make money, but they only make money if you make money. So they're going to give you all the support and time you want. I can have calls any day of the week with my franchisor if I'm having an issue or a question. And the other big support system is obviously you have a network of non-competing owners. It's interesting, almost weekly you'll get an email from somebody that says, hey, I just tried this new marketing thing. It went over really well. Maybe you'll want to try it. It's not like a traditional business where everybody keeps their trade secrets tightly held to their chest. People are really eager and I think proud when they do something well that they want to share with you. So you have all that in the franchising world. And to me, that's what the value. I'm paying 5% of my revenue. So that was the value there. And I don't think I could have done this without a franchise. As mentioned, we jumped into cookie cutters haircuts for kids. It's, as it implies, a kids salon. We deal with first haircuts up to about 12 years old. And me and my wife have no experience with haircuts. Never would have fathomed we'd be in this industry. My wife is corporate America, doing HR and now IT consulting. So she's not the stylist, which most people assume. She actually has a little activity with it other than if I have some HR questions for her. We did open 5/18/20. We were supposed to open before that, but COVID was a wrench that I'm sure everybody else had to live through. So we just it is what it is. Learned a lot. I'll never forget that year. Located in Perrysburg, and I will say, bragging a little bit, we have a 4.9 Google rating, 300 plus reviews, and it's only been just over a year. So things are going well. I think the market's there for what we're doing. I'd open a second store already, but as everyone's experiencing, it's hard to find good workers. That's my only real struggle right now. If I had any complaints, but again, that's it for everybody. So there's no reason to focus on it. What I would do the same, work with the franchise broker. When I watched that webinar about semi-absentee, I immediately started thinking this makes a lot of sense. So I called Tracy, not doing a plug for her, but she was great. And the reason the franchise broker, as she mentioned, I was able to look at multiple franchises. And that all came from taking the assessment. The assessment's just a real quick profile thing. What do you like? What do you don't like? And after I did that, she came back with 4 options for me. I narrowed it down to 3. And then I got into due diligence. I think this is a part that a lot of franchise people skip on or don't do it as diligently as they should. I'm actually a SCORE mentor and have talked to a couple people looking at franchises, and most people look at it and say, it's working in Columbus, or I went to this place in Indiana and it was packed. I think Toledo needs one, let's go. And they don't really do all the vesting as they should. So some of the things I would say, call and visit other locations. The franchisor is going to give you a list of all the locations, and they're probably going to say, here's 3 that you should call and talk to. I actually asked for 12 contacts. So I did the top 4, bottom 4, then 4, which I would consider benchmarks, and called all of them. All the owners are really open to talking with you because they love sharing their story. So it really doesn't hurt to call as many as you can. I found out pitfalls, the good things, the bad things, and I was able to also use their information when I did my financial modeling, which I'll speak to. Then the other big thing is I visited other locations. And since it was a haircut place, and you saw in the picture I had at the time a 2-year-old son, I would take him to these places and just act like a normal guest, see how he did, how they operated, and then I would contact the owner afterwards, let him know my experience and get any questions I had at that time. The other big thing is financial modeling. I don't think a lot of people do, but I knew what my break even was pretty early, and essentially with this, I was trying to prove why the franchises wouldn't work, and that's how I eliminated 2 of them and ended up with the haircut salon. Another big thing I do the same is understand the owners and goals. The owners, if they're not in it for the long haul, I don't know if I would have wanted to be in it for the long haul. It's a very lucrative business when you are a franchise owner because you're essentially getting recurring revenue every day and you're not doing much and you really have no overhead. But I want to make sure they weren't trying to grow just to sell. So I understood their goals, what their process was, and it made me more comfortable because at the end of the day, you really are a partner. If they would have sold, someone comes in, changes structures and what you're doing, you kind of are tied to them. Lastly, negotiating contract. They are going to tell you, and I think Tracy, correct me if I'm wrong, that they are template boilerplate stuff that they can't change, because if they change it for you, they change it for everybody. And that's what they told me, but I stuck to my guns, and I was able to negotiate a larger footprint territory-wise and better terms, because again, they want you to open up multiple stores as fast as possible. I didn't think that made sense from a cash flow standpoint, but I was able to negotiate terms, which they really didn't want to at first, but then they came back and said, well, we'll accept. So don't let them bully you into thinking it is what it is. What I would do differently, and I hope this doesn't offend Tracy, but I would not buy the whole territory at once, unless you are in a space where you know someone's going to try to gobble it up. The reason I say don't buy the whole territory or multiple rights, you're going to tie cash up immediately. For example, my my rights are $40,000 for one space and then $20,000 for additional. So if you don't plan on opening that additional space for a year, 2, 3 years, you're just tying up money for no reason. And what I've learned through talking with the owners, realistically, they want to have less owners, more stores than having more or equal numbers. So in Toledo, if I pick on that market, if they have 3 stores, they would rather have me owning all 3 because it's going to be consistent. They don't have to deal with one person versus having 3 different owners that might, have different ideas and change the brand in that region. So I think if I would have held out and then said, hey, I'm ready for the second store, they would have been fine with that, or they would have probably approached me and said, hey, we have someone else interested. Maybe you should buy now. But again, that's just versus tying up all your money at once. The other thing I would do is wait to sign a contract until space is negotiated. You're obviously excited after you do your due diligence, you know it's going to work. You want to just sign and get going. But that doesn't mean the real estate is available or the market's ready for it. So I signed my contract in September, gave them the money, and then I waited until I couldn't find space until January. And that means you start the build out and all that. So I was to the point where I was getting so desperate, I almost bought space, which would have been higher rent and less ideal location. But luckily the skies aligned and someone defaulted on their space and the landlord got me in. But it would have been way smoother if I would have, again, found the space and then came back to them and said, hey, I'll sign the contract, I'm ready to go. And that's not always going to be foolproof because someone else could be buying the rights to that at the same time. So you really need to understand if it makes sense or not, but that's something I would recommend. The other thing is ask about owner forms and owner documents. They do provide you decent information, and I found out a lot by calling people. But once you sign, it's like they open the gates and say, welcome to the family. And then I was able to get into owners forums and learn a lot of things I didn't even think about asking. It was all good information, but I think it was things that would have maybe not changed, but I could have foreseen or had ways to combat earlier on versus waiting until I paid the money. Then I found out about some of these maybe pitfalls. And owner documents, they literally have a manual of how to do everything, but they're understandably so, they're not really wanting to share that. But there's information there that I think would be very beneficial. So if you can get your access to any of that stuff, it doesn't hurt to ask. Final thoughts, wrapping up. Franchising to me it was always a business. It was supposed to be a business. That's why I never looked at franchising. But after finding about semi-absentee, franchising is an investment for me. People, when I did it, they're like, oh, so you're leaving Bassett to go cut hair? And that's not the case at all. I'm in that salon maybe 10 minutes a week just to grab the cash to make deposits. I have a half-hour conference call with my manager weekly, and right now I'm only probably putting 2 hours at most a week into it, just doing payroll and accounting. Unfortunately, it's a side effect of not having enough stylists that we're booked out in advance, so there's no reason to do really any marketing right now. We're kind of in a cruise control mode. But the good part is, from an investment standpoint, my initial investment is going to be paid off in about 2.5 years. So I got about a year and a half. And after that, I should be, if I maintain just the same level I'm at right now, a 30% return on my investment. But as we grow, that's only going to get higher. So it's something, when you think about real estate investing or other stuff, that was the route I was going to go until this came along. And I figured I'm a business owner. I understand business. I don't understand property management. So it made a lot more sense for me to go in the franchising world. And I'm very happy I did, even, again, all things considered with COVID and whatnot. The other big topic is pushing your comfort zone. As a business owner, I'm sure most of you can probably do everything inside of your business. So for example, if my shipping person doesn't show up, I have no problem jumping on a forklift and just getting things done. It's not ideal, but I can do it. So I've never have to be too concerned. With my franchise, the product, the service is provided by someone that's licensed to do it, and they really are my profit center. I cannot jump in and start cutting kids' hair. I don't know how to do it. I couldn't do it. So I've had to put a lot of faith in someone else making me money. It sounds weird in that way, but they are essentially doing that. So I've had to treat them, I wouldn't say better, because I treat my employees, I think, pretty well, but it's different because I'm relying on someone for the success of the business. So what that's done is translated some different things I've done at Bassett, because it just puts it into a different perspective of, that, but it's also, it's changed my way of thinking now. As Tracy mentioned, I can take off days and I just have no concerns that everything's going smooth. Where previous, I don't know if I could have done that, because again, I've always had to be there to put out fires. So it's just changed my lifestyle in general, which is good. And I wouldn't have had that without jumping into a franchise. Last thing is my email address. When I'm on these calls, I never ask questions. I'm too timid maybe to ask questions. So I would encourage anybody that is interested in franchising, if they think they could learn anything from me, I'd love to take you to a lunch or breakfast and share any wisdom I had, because I wouldn't be where I'm at without people sharing their wisdom with me. So feel free to hit me up and I'll answer any questions if you aren't scared to ask questions right now.
Excellent. Thank you both for sharing. I appreciate it. Tracy, do you have any thoughts on what Jeff said or any follow-ups on that? I do have questions, so I'll be asking those if.
I love what Jeff says, and the only thing that, the great thing about franchise is that everything is there. Some of the things that would be, difficult is, I'm not sure franchisors would help you negotiate your lease without you being a franchisee. But other than that, Jeff's right on. Franchising really can be looked at as an investment and not just a job. And it's working, for what, he's a perfect example of someone looking at something semi-absentee to diversify what they're doing and still having the lifestyle.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the questions then that we've had kind of rolling in. So what makes now a good time to franchise? Is COVID helping or hurting the franchise industry?
It is helping. A lot of franchises are experiencing some double-digit growth. Folks are home. So if we think about all of a sudden when COVID hit, anything residential, your mom and dad were home working, kids were working from home or learning from home, and people needed to modify. They may have had no home office. Well, now we need 2 home offices and a learning space. So there are a lot of home modifications that were going on in anything residential that was double digit. Some industries that are just insane. Think about new pool starts. They're up 45%. If you decided today that you wanted to install a pool, you are looking at fall of 2022 for that installation. Once we all go back to work, those pools need to be maintained, and we're not going to be home to doing it. So there's some industries that are not only doing really well now, but are going to continue to grow. Other industries are things like dogs. There's a lot of COVID dogs out there. So all of those businesses are having some incredible growth. And then it shocks me and almost pains me sometimes to say it, but food is actually looking like some segments that are going to be really good in the franchise industries, because a lot of the smaller businesses really couldn't pivot and maintain with all the changes going on through COVID. So there's some franchises in the food space that are really poised for some excellent growth. So franchising is just a great industry normally, and even now, some areas even more so. So I don't know, Jeff, you have anything to add to that, but that's kind of what I'm seeing.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is I think it is still a good time. Again, other than employees, I'm sitting on my hands for a second location, but money is very cheap right now. And on the flip side, people actually have money, so they're spending more and going out and doing things. So I would say it's not a bad opportune time. And if you follow the markets at all and you're scared that the market, might start to continue to dip that it started yesterday, you could divest your money and put it into, something that you can control. That's the other thing I like about franchising is I'm not hoping it works in the market. It's just diversifying my portfolio, and ultimately I'm in control of if it succeeds or doesn't succeed.
That's a great point, Jeff. So along those lines of employees then, Do you have any franchises, Tracy, that don't require employees? And do any of the franchisees help you find employees?
Yes, yes, and yes. So there are franchises where you don't have employees, where it is you and you, the franchise itself provides the system, the curriculum, the information that's there for you to go out and sell. So there are those franchises. There are franchises that don't have employees, but you're only using contractors or 1099, and they have that list or that method of not only recruiting that person who's going to do the work, but also vetting them. Because a lot of times, you know, like with Jeff, I mean, he doesn't know how to cut hair. And actually, if he did, honestly, cookie cutters probably wouldn't want him as an owner because they want him to focus on being an owner. So they have that method of not only finding it, but vetting and knowing that they can do things. And then franchising, of course, we can't go out in the world right now and not see a help wanted sign somewhere. So franchises actually have those methods and the systems in place to hire and retain employees. So while we all think of employees being an issue right now, and in some industries they are, and it's something we have to consistently stay on top of, but there are a lot of businesses that really know how to not only find them, but keep them and maintain them.
Okay. Another question that came in. So what industries are presenting the biggest opportunities right now? What has the best ROI?
Oh gosh, anything in the service industry. If we're just looking at straight up ROI, any of the services have probably the highest margins and the best return on investment right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that from my standpoint, being a service. When I looked into this, my two non-negotiables were I couldn't sell something that was on Amazon and it couldn't be imported from China. And the service I selected is not going away. Yes, you could do a home haircut or there's other options, but the return on investment is good because it's not going away. It's always going to be needed in the community.
Okay. So Jeff, for you, and you kind of touched upon this, but how do you feel about owning a business without experience? You kind of talked about without the experience of cutting hair.
Yep.
You kind
That goes
going outside your comfort zone, but like, how does that really feel?
So I was somewhat fortunate before I got started, and I would probably maybe recommend this. I knew I was going into the salon business. I found a manager early on that was on board. So that kind of eased my, oh no, will I find anybody to work for me, et cetera, who's going to run this? Because there are nuances that I wasn't, aware of as far as industry, like what cleaning supplies you had to use, sanitation for, your product and whatnot. And it's all the stuff that the salon or the cosmetologists learn. So if I didn't have that, I probably would have had to go get a little more education. But yeah, it was really me just handing off the ropes and saying, I don't want to say, I don't know the correct term, but I was just, is a blind faith jump leap, whatever you want to call it. But it's turned out well. And again, it's kind of changed my complete mind shift of how you can operate a business, because I've always been just so hands-on with other businesses.
Okay. Is there any particular brand that you see kind of exploding in the franchise world currently?
I would tell you, if there's anything exploding, be a little bit leery at first, because a lot of times that's more of a fad and not something that's going to be around for a long time. Now, if you're somebody that knows exactly how to ride the waves, go for it. Ride that fad, get out before it dips. But most of us are looking for something for more of a long haul. So when I think of a brand that's exploding, my mind first goes to fad. Other times I go to something that is selling really fast. So I think about an example of 1-800-GOT-JUNK. Before most people knew what it was sold out across the country. Orange Theory could be another one of those ideas. So it could be, the other thought I have when you have these brands that are taking off is that maybe by the time you've noticed it, it's actually too late to get that appropriate territory or that same opportunity.
Okay.
And I would add, from my due diligence, other research, you usually find the fads are on the coasts and they come into the Midwest. And if they're selling out there, eventually I think that gets to us. So if you do want to be ahead of the game, look at what's going on the outside of our country, because it kind of comes into the Midwest as popularity grows, if you're trying to get ahead of the curve.
care. Jeff, you had mentioned industry groups or owner forums. Are those all within the same industry? So are they all cookie cutter owners, or are
Yeah,
they?
it was a forum, all cookie cutter owners. And again, once you paid, you had access to different information, but it was just, there was a lot of, because they would post, you know, I'm having this issue, then you get every possible response to help. So it would have been just really good as my due diligence went on, just to read through those things. So I'd already know what's coming, how do I tackle it, versus now I would have it come, then I'd have to say, how do I tackle it? I could have been very proactive versus reactive.
Sure. And Tracy, do you see that in other franchises besides cookie cutters? There's owner forums.
Yeah, so all franchises really have that owner forum, and it can be something as simple as like a private Facebook group where just the owners are allowed to talk. The individual franchisees are allowed to talk between themselves of issues and concerns and how did you overcome that. And then other ones maybe have something that's more formal, as part of an intranet system or something to talk about. But yes, all franchises have it from one way or another, because we learn the best from each other, right, as we go through the systems.
Absolutely. That's why the center exists.
Right.
So Jeff, this question is for you. So what did the hiring and recruiting process look like for you, and how did you find employees?
So I've used every source from Indeed, Facebook, word of mouth, even put out, things to my customer list saying, I'll give you years of free haircut if you can just give me a name and a contact. But as far as getting the leads in once they come in, they are luckily, they have to have a license. So I know they're capable of doing what they say they should be doing. That doesn't mean they're not going to be good at it. My one horror story, and I feel bad for using my kid as the guinea pig, but we had someone fresh out of Penta, said she was great at cutting hair, let him sit in the chair. My wife calls me crying because he literally was shaved. Yeah, I mean, it's a good story now, but at the time she's like, what have you gotten me into, Jeff? Because now my kid, he looks, it was terrible. So we make them bring their own child in now for a haircut, or their own, I guess, client, if you will, make sure they can do it well. And then my manager, since she knows what she's doing, she shadows them for a few days. And it's called spot checks. Before every customer can get out of the chair, the manager has to come over and look at it and say, yep, it's good, or no, it's, you missed a little spot here or there. But for the most part, they know what they're doing if they're in the industry. And then I know what other salons have a similar style haircut. So I try to poach those employees, because with Indeed, they have a tool for recruiting. I can literally type in a company name and then reach directly to those people if they have a resume on Indeed. So a lot of different techniques, but I hope that answers it.
Yeah. So how did you find your manager then, if she's running the operation more or less?
That was just very random, very fortunate. She actually worked at a cookie cutters in another state, was relocated here because her husband was going to get a master's at BG. So again, when stars align kind of stuff, that's all the universe, I think, telling me to take the jump. Just somewhat dumb luck.
Okay. And then the last question I have so far is, are they all big investments, Tracy, or do you have some that are smaller? And then if there are smaller, do you see people investing in several different franchises?
Yeah, so investment ranges are all over the place. So as I mentioned, we really focus on businesses that allow you to build a six-figure income. So I would say all in, they could be anywhere from $75,000 for something that's in the service industry, to as high as $1 million. Obviously, if you're doing something with a lot of real estate, but there's really a sweet spot around 150,000, 200,000 all in, and the ability to look at a wide range of concepts.
Okay, great. If there aren't any further questions, I would highly encourage you to reach out to Jeff to hear his story or to get his feedback, or to Tracy. If she can help you in any way, they've been great to work with and they have great stories. Obviously, Jeff's poor kid.
I can share pictures.
It's a great story. I just posted on there our social media for the center. So please follow us, check us out on YouTube and on our website. You'll get some good information about some of the upcoming events that we have going on there. And as always, we want to thank you for joining us, and we want to thank our sponsors, Huntington, Fifth Third Bank, Raymond, William Vaughn Company, Skylight, Highland, Eastman and Smith, and Shoemaker, Lupin Kendrick. So this will be recorded, or this is recorded, and it will be on our YouTube video. We will send that link out to everybody who joined us today. Have a good day. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.